When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
On a need-to-know basis, he's got you covered. Elias Makos, CJAD 800.
It's inevitable that the print newspaper is going to end, and we're switching to online like everybody else. My fear is that we won't have enough staff left to even produce an online edition. That's my own personal fear. You need people to produce whatever the product is.
That's the voice of Terry Mosher. You know him as Aislinn, of course, the Montreal Gazette editorial cartoonist, talking about the fate of newspapers. Now, this week we learned that Postmedia will lay off 11% of their editorial staff. Of course, the news comes as a shock. It has demoralized those newsrooms across the country. And Postmedia, of course, owns publications like the National Post, the Calgary Herald, and, of course, the Montreal Gazette. Postmedia's acting senior vice president of editorial content, Jerry Knott, explained that there isn't a property in our network that won't be affected by a restructuring and a reorganization or layoff. That means pretty much no one is safe from these cutbacks. Let's go now to the president of CWA Canada, the media union, which represents some Postmedia workers, get their perspective on this latest round of layoffs. Martin O'Hanlon joins us now on the line. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good morning, Elias.
So listen, first things first, right off the top, right? Those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Media across the country, including our own, has faced cutbacks over the last little while, right? Revenue's decreasing. The revenue has gone to Google and Facebook, and now we're sort of trying to deal with the new normal here. Cutbacks happen. But why don't you put in perspective why you were shocked at the level of cutbacks happening at Postmedia?
Yeah, that's a good point, Elias. So over the last 30 years, papers have probably lost 75% of their staff, or even more in some cases. I mean, I remember when the Montreal Gazette newsroom had probably had 100 people in it, and now what are they down to? Maybe 30 something. So it's been massive cuts over the years. So we thought, wave after wave of cuts, we finally thought, okay, they've cut to the bone. We hear from our people, they have trouble taking vacation. They have to get basically forced overtime. They're working all the time. It's a lot of stress. And we thought, okay, they can't cut anymore. And then here they come in and say, we're cutting 11%. And by the way, that's 11% on average. Some locations are being hit much harder. For example, the Gazette is going to have far more than 11% cut. So we were shocked because we didn't think they could cut anymore. As I've kind of said before, we think they've hit the basement and then they dig a new basement. And it's really quite horrifying for the consequences for communities and for journalism.
Let me ask you, Postmedia, that's a publicly traded company, right?
Yes.
So we have some indication of their financials, right? Does the financial situation of Postmedia indicate that cutbacks have to happen?
So here's the problem with Postmedia that I think nobody really understands. Is that when Postmedia was created out of the ashes of CanWest and Southern, it was created through a massive debt. They inherited a massive debt. And they took on a massive debt. And the only way that the company could have survived successfully was if revenues improved. And of course, as we all know, over the last 20 years, revenues have actually sunk. So you had this company now that was faced with basically they were incapable of being a successful company. And we're to the point now where, revenues aren't the best, but it's not that's putting them in this desperate situation. It's this massive debt load they have. They owe this money to a hedge fund in the U.S. and to basically a vulture fund here in Canada. And they can't make those payments and keep the company alive unless they make cuts.
Okay, so they're facing that. They need to make these payments. So then is there a solution? I mean, that doesn't mean 11% cuts and, of course, more in certain cities. How do you square the circle if the debt has to be repaid?
Well, as I've said to them, to the company in a call, I said, cannot the debt holders take a debt holiday until we sort out this, post-COVID crisis that we've been going through where revenues have dropped. The idea is that digital revenue will pick back up and that revenues will recover. So why don't they take a little debt holiday instead of demanding the $10 million or $20 million in payments each year, which is absolutely crippling the company and will ultimately lead to its failure or bankruptcy if they keep doing this. If they take a holiday, let the company recover, and then look at it 6 months or a year from now. So that's one possible way of looking at it. The other way is start selling your properties. See if there's people out there that will buy them, and look for community groups. I'm sure that there's got to be some well-heeled investors in Montreal who'll be willing to get together and buy the Montreal Gazette. We've seen it with the Washington Post and others. So that's another option.
The Gazette, of course, launched in 1778, if memory serves me right. This is an institution here in the city. If things continue as they are right now, Martin, I've heard people talk about, well, maybe the Gazette goes away in a couple of years or even sooner, right? What in the worst case scenario, Martin? What's the worst case scenario for Canadian journalists and for Canadians who need access to local media?
Well, I mean, we're pretty close to the worst case scenario right now, and that is that we just basically have a skeleton crew of journalists who are not able to do the important stories. They're able to cover the basic stuff, your car crashes and a bit of City Hall and this and that, but they're not able to delve into the stuff that really needs to be looked at and that's important for communities. And we're really close to that point right now. My one hope is that the ad revenues do recover and the digital starts to pick up. And of course, there is still this initiative by the federal government to force Facebook and Google to transfer some of that ad revenue over to newspapers. So that is in the future, and that could be a lifesaver for newspapers.
We're with Martin O'Hanlon, president of CWA Canada, the media union. Union represents some Postmedia workers. So Martin, let me just ask you on, finding a way where newspapers become viable. I look towards executives and leadership at these big companies. Can you say that there have been decisions made, let's forget the debt for a second, decisions on how executives either pay themselves or run operations, which have made these situations worse?
Well, absolutely. So the two big problems are, as I've said to you, the debt holders demanding these massive payments so that they can give their investors these massive payoffs of 10, 13%, which is ludicrous. But the other thing is, I think it was last year, Andrew McLeod, who's the CEO of Postmedia, was paid $3 million in compensation. And the year before, and I think last year was about $1.5 million. That, by the way, is much higher than the average pay for a media CEO, even in the United States. So they're paying their executives at a much higher rate than successful companies in the U.S. are being paid. That just doesn't make any sense to me. How can that possibly be? And then paying these usurious interest rates. It's a recipe for disaster. Nobody could make this company work with the structure that it currently has right now.
Martin, I hate in stories like this, when we talk about Canadian media, I hate when we lead to solutions that require, let's say, government bailouts. Every time the government gets involved with media, it leads to very easy conspiracy theories, right? And it sort of erodes trust, right? So I hate when government needs to intervene to save media. Having said that, is there a role here for government to create an environment where local media can thrive?
Well, I think that's what they're trying to do. I think that's what they're trying to do right now. And it's not government interference in the sense that they're requiring the revenues from Google and Facebook to come to newspapers. That's not a government. The government's not, running that program. They're just simply putting in place a mechanism where that will happen. So it's not really government interference. And of course, there's always conspiracy theorists about anytime anybody does anything. But I think that's the most hands-off approach that the federal government can do, and they're doing it. So let's see how that plays out. But, basically that's because, Google and Facebook and that, you're taking all this digital ad revenue, not paying the taxes that local papers do, and it's only fair that they give some of that money back when they're borrowing content, basically, from newspapers and making money off it.
Martin, just to wrap up here, the thing that matters most to our listeners, the Montreal Gazette, do you have any new information, or do you have any more knowledge about the cuts that will happen at the Gazette? The latest we've heard that it could be up to 20% of the newsroom that's laid off.
which again is frightening when you've already had so many cuts in the past. So that scares us, and we'll obviously be pressuring the company to find alternatives and recognize that the Gazette is absolutely vital to the community in Montreal, and it's important for our democracy. And it's terrible for journalism to be doing this. So, on all sides, they need to do what they can to save as many jobs as they can at the Gazette so that the news can be covered.
Martin, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks very much.
That's Martin O'Hanlon, president of CWA Canada, the media union there.